The storm had finally passed, but the air still carried that strange, metallic stillness that follows a night of thunder. In the faint morning light, the Lawrence family home looked almost peaceful, its pale shutters trembling in the breeze. But inside the living room, where the scent of old cedar and forgotten dreams lingered, 7 grown siblings sat in silence, staring at the man they once called the only adult they could trust, their uncle, Raymond Ellis, the man who raised them after tragedy, the man who promised to protect everything their parents left behind, the man who, just moments earlier, had been confronted with a single sheet of paper, a sheet that threatened to unravel the story he'd clung to for nearly 2 decades. The lawyer's voice had been calm, almost too calm, as he slid that document across the polished table. It was the updated financial audit, quiet, devastating, and precise. A summary of 18 years of transactions from a trust worth $3.5 million, created for 7 orphaned children after their parents died in a highway collision. The paper looked harmless, but what it revealed was anything but. Raymond didn't pick it up at first. He simply stared at it, his jaw tight, his eyes refusing to meet the faces around him. Outside, wind scraped through the trees like restless fingers on glass. The oldest niece, Lena, shifted forward, her shaking hands gripping the armrests. "Uncle Ray, what is this?" she whispered. He didn't answer. The truth hung between them, thick and electric, waiting to be exposed. Before we sink deeper into this harrowing unraveling, pause a moment. Let us know where you're joining from and what your first instinct tells you. Was this a story of desperation, entitlement, or something far darker? And if this kind of investigative dive grips you, tap the like button and stay with us. These stories only come to light because you help keep them alive. The Lawrence tragedy began long before that meeting room confrontation, before the siblings learned that their trust fund, once brimming with security and hope, had been drained almost to nothing. It began on a cold November morning 18 years earlier, when their parents, Nathaniel and Miriam Lawrence, were driving from a weekend retreat in northern Georgia. Reports suggest the rain was so heavy that visibility blurred into gray curtains. Witnesses recall seeing a pickup truck, hydroplane, spinning across the highway and slamming into the Lawrence SUV. The impact was instant, fatal. The siblings ranged from 2 to 14. 7 children left without a mother, without a father, without a world that made sense anymore. In the aftermath, the question rose immediately: who would take them? Their uncle Raymond, Miriam's older brother, stepped forward with unwavering certainty. He was 42, unmarried, meticulous, working as an accountant at a mid-sized firm in the suburbs outside Atlanta. To the community, he seemed like the perfect guardian, stable, deeply involved in church, calm in a crisis. He told the court he would honor my sister by raising her children with everything I have. Those words were printed in the local paper. For a brief moment, he was celebrated as a hero. Behind the scenes, however, lawyers and financial advisors were scrambling through another process: securing the family's assets. The Lawrence had been careful, responsible, cautious, planners by nature. They had life insurance, investments, a home paid off, and college funds already growing. All of it was folded into a trust designated solely for the 7 children. With interest, projections estimated the trust would reach more than $3.5 million by the time the youngest turned 18. Raymond was appointed trustee. It was a role built on absolute trust, a role requiring precision, documentation, and transparency. A role that would give him legal control over every dollar meant for the children. At first, there was no reason to question him. The children were grieving, adjusting to a world that didn't feel like theirs anymore. Neighbors brought food. Members of Raymond's church helped with childcare. He enrolled the kids in school, kept their routines steady, and insisted they never worry about the money stuff. He told teachers, doctors, and caseworkers that he wanted them to focus on growing up, not finances. And in those early years, he played the part flawlessly. Birthdays were modest but happy. They went on small church trips, weekend picnics, and occasional movie nights. Nothing extravagant, nothing suspicious. Raymond presented himself as a man sacrificing his own life to raise children that weren't his own. But beneath that, something darker was quietly taking shape. As the trust matured, small withdrawals labeled household expenses began to appear. A few $100s at a time, then a few thousand, always rationalized. always explained as necessary for the children's care. No one questioned it. The court required annual statements, but the summaries didn't reveal the full picture. By the time Lena, the eldest, turned 18, she had no idea that nearly $300,000 had already vanished. Life moved on. Raymond continued to appear dependable, if somewhat controlling. He kept tight oversight on everything: the children's friends, their schedules, their grades. He discouraged them from asking about finances, claiming money discussions create entitlement. He positioned himself as the guardian of moral order, the protector against the temptations and dangers of the outside world. But control can be a mask, one that's polished enough to hide motives growing like mold in the dark. As the children became adults, they built lives of their own: college, jobs, marriages. They visited Raymond on holidays, still grateful, still loyal. It wasn't until the youngest, Caleb, turned 20 that the first real crack appeared. Caleb needed documentation for a student loan, proof of the trust's balance. When he asked his uncle, Raymond's reaction was immediate and defensive. He insisted there was no reason to look at the documents, claiming the trust wasn't what it used to be because of medical bills and unexpected costs. He said Caleb should focus on school and leave the financial stress to adults. But Caleb was an adult, and something about that answer felt wrong. He called his oldest sister, Lena, who had started to notice other odd details through the years: their uncle's new truck, his gradually upgraded wardrobe, the way he always had excuses about why tuition assistance wasn't available yet. She brushed it off as coincidence until Caleb's call hardened a suspicion she'd been scared to name. They requested the account statements. Raymond stalled. They pushed. He resisted. Weeks passed, then months, until Lena reached out to an attorney who specialized in trust and estate fraud. Once a formal audit was requested, Raymond could no longer delay, and the truth, 18 years of it, was about to be exposed. The documents arrived in a thick envelope, heavier than paper had any right to be. Transaction lists, bank transfers, wire logs, every number meticulously printed, every number reflecting a betrayal more calculated than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just occasional withdrawals. It wasn't just poor bookkeeping. It wasn't even financial mismanagement. It was embezzlement, intentional, repeated, layered beneath fabricated receipts and inflated expenses. The trust should have held more than $3.5 million. It had less than $52,000, and most of the missing money led straight back to Raymond. When the siblings confronted him inside the lawyer's office, the air felt as if it might split open. Raymond sat rigid, his hands folded so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He insisted he did nothing wrong, that raising 7 children on one income is impossible, that he deserved compensation. But the document said otherwise. Nearly $800,000 had gone to personal purchases over the years: cars, vacations, consulting fees, even gym memberships. Another $500,000 flowed into an investment account in Raymond's name alone. More than $1.2 million was unaccounted for entirely, marked simply as miscellaneous. Investigators later described that category as a black hole of untraceable movement. The siblings listened in stunned silence. Years of love, trust, and gratitude collapsing in on themselves like a dying star. Their uncle had raised them, yes, but he had also stolen their future while doing it. Raymond finally broke his silence with a single sentence, cold, rehearsed: "I did what I had to do." But the truth was far from necessity. It was greed, and it had been hiding in plain sight for almost 2 decades. When the lawyer leaned forward and asked him if he wanted to make a formal statement, Raymond's eyes finally lifted, not toward the attorney, not toward the documents, but toward the 7 faces he'd once promised to protect. His voice trembled. "You owe me," he said quietly. "Every one of you. Without me, you would have had nothing." The room fell into a chilling stillness. Because in that moment, the story shifted. This wasn't just financial betrayal. This wasn't merely mismanagement. This was a man rewriting history in real time, clinging to a narrative where he was the hero, even as the truth lay exposed at his feet. The siblings exchanged glances, each seeing the same realization in the other's eyes. The man they trusted for 18 years wasn't their guardian after all. He was their thief, and the investigation had only just begun. What began with a single audit expanded into something far larger and far more unsettling. Once the attorney filed a formal inquiry with the state's Financial Oversight Division, everything Raymond had spent 18 years burying began rising to the surface. Quiet at first, then loudly, then violently, like a truth that refused to stay hidden any longer. Investigators arrived at his home one gray Monday morning. Reports suggest they noticed immediately that Raymond's quiet life was anything but quiet. His driveway held two vehicles far newer than anything a small firm accountant should realistically afford. His garage contained high-end tools, camping gear, and multiple luxury appliances still in boxes. It wasn't criminal evidence, not yet, but it told a story. A story about a man who lived far above the life he showed the children he raised. Inside his home, the contrast was even sharper. One officer later recalled in his deposition that the living room walls were lined with framed vacation photographs, none of which included the children. Trips to Cancun, Maui, Vancouver, and a week-long cruise through the Mediterranean, all taken during years when the siblings remembered staying home because money was tight. It was the first sign that Raymond had lived a life they never knew existed. As investigators combed through his financial records, a pattern quickly emerged. He had begun dipping into the trust less than a year after taking custody. At first, it was small withdrawals that could blend into the background. But as the children grew older and more independent, his spending escalated. Annual vacations, a personal investment portfolio, expensive online purchases. And most devastating of all, transfers to accounts the children never knew he had. One forensic accountant described the pattern as calculated opportunism. Raymond waited until the children were young adults, busy with school and work, before he initiated the largest withdrawals. It was as if he believed the trust no longer held meaning once the children left his home, as if their independence canceled his obligation, as if their future was his to rewrite. But paperwork wasn't the only thing revealing the truth. Neighbors began speaking up. One woman told officers that Raymond frequently hosted backyard barbecues for coworkers, events that he never invited the children to. Another recalled seeing him load new furniture into his home, even as he told Lena he couldn't afford to help with her tuition that semester. A third neighbor admitted she'd always wondered how he managed to travel so often while claiming to live paycheck to paycheck. The truth wasn't just emerging, it was flooding. Meanwhile, the siblings found themselves reliving childhood memories that suddenly felt twisted. All the times Raymond refused to buy school supplies. The nights he turned off the heating to save money. The year he declined Caleb's request to join a school basketball team because the fees weren't in the budget. They remembered how guilty they'd felt for asking for anything at all, believing their uncle was sacrificing everything for them. But he wasn't sacrificing, he was collecting. 18 years of it. The siblings attended every meeting, every interview, every hearing. Watching their former guardian unravel became a strange mixture of vindication and heartbreak. No one wanted this to be true. They had loved him, trusted him, celebrated him on Father's Day. One of the sisters, Naomi, admitted in a statement later that she felt like she was grieving him the same way we grieved our parents, except this time he was alive and choosing to betray us. Raymond, for his part, remained defensive. He hired a lawyer known for aggressive countersuits, claiming the children were turning on the only person who cared for them. He insisted the trust documents were misleading, that his withdrawals were justified, that his actions were misinterpreted through bitterness. He even argued that the siblings owed him compensation for the emotional and financial burden of raising 7 children. But investigators were unmoved. The deeper they dug, the more the facade collapsed. Receipts had been fabricated, invoices duplicated, expenses inflated. He had written checks to non-existent contractors, claimed repairs that had never happened, even submitted mileage reimbursements for transporting the children during years when none of them lived with him anymore. The turning point came when officers discovered a storage unit in his name. Inside were boxes of documents he had attempted to hide, bank statements, handwritten notes, and an old laptop containing years of spreadsheets. Some spreadsheets were legitimate budgeting files. Others were projection tables showing exactly how much he could take each year without raising suspicion. He had planned his theft. He had monitored it. He had nurtured it. And when officers interviewed him again, he finally confronted the weight of the evidence. His hands shook slightly. His voice cracked. He looked older than the man who had once confidently declared himself the savior of 7 grieving children. But he still didn't confess. Instead, he repeated the same quiet refrain, "You owe me." Those words would echo throughout the case, haunting the siblings who heard them, shaping the public perception of a man who had once been praised for heroism. Reporters began digging into the story, uncovering the layers of financial deceit. It became a local scandal. An uncle celebrated for taking in orphan children, now under investigation for stealing their entire inheritance. Public opinion shifted fast. Community members who once applauded him now felt misled. Former coworkers came forward anonymously, describing a man obsessed with perception, a man who resented his responsibilities, a man who believed he never received the recognition he deserved. The investigation stretched for months, every document analyzed, every withdrawal traced, every lie untangled. When the final report was completed, it totaled more than 300 pages, each page a piece of the truth Raymond had tried to bury. It concluded that he had embezzled more than $2.9 million, that he had breached his fiduciary duty repeatedly, and that his actions were consistent with long-term personal enrichment. The district attorney recommended charges: trust embezzlement, fraud, forgery, breach of fiduciary responsibility, and theft by conversion. Raymond was arrested on a quiet Thursday morning. Cameras captured the moment, his hands cuffed, his expression hollow, his life unraveled. The siblings watched the footage later that night, not with triumph, but with a strange, heavy sadness. As Lena said, this wasn't justice. This was tragedy. During the trial, prosecutors painted a picture of a man who exploited grief for profit. They presented evidence of transfers, vacations, purchases, and cover-ups. They shared testimonies from neighbors, teachers, financial officers, and even church members. But the most powerful moment came when Caleb took the stand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He simply looked at his uncle and said, "You didn't steal our money. You stole our trust. You stole the life our parents wanted us to have, and you made us grateful for it." The courtroom fell silent. Raymond avoided eye contact. After a 2-week trial, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on multiple counts. The judge sentenced him to 14 years in state prison with restitution requirements that would take the rest of his life to repay. Not that he ever could. The money was gone, spent, absorbed, diluted into years of self-indulgence. The siblings sat together at the sentencing. They didn't cheer, they didn't speak. They simply breathed, slowly, painfully, as the weight of 18 years finally began to loosen. The aftermath was complicated. The siblings struggled not just with financial trauma, but emotional unraveling. They questioned their childhood memories, wondered how much of their lives had been shaped by lies. Some sought therapy, some avoided talking about it. Some found themselves angry at their parents for trusting the wrong person. All of them faced a new chapter rebuilt from the ashes of a stolen future. Yet there was something healing in the truth being exposed. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, they understood what had happened to them, what had been taken, what had been hidden. And though they could not reclaim the money, they could reclaim themselves. The home where they once lived with Raymond was sold. The trust was closed. The remaining funds split evenly. A quiet end to a loud story. But the scar remains, because sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people we would have sworn were incapable of hurting us. People we loved, people we trusted, people who smiled while stealing from us. And that is the real tragedy of the Lauren siblings' story. Not the money lost, but the love that was weaponized, the trust that was broken, and the future that was rewritten by the very person assigned to protect it. Sometimes the darkest secrets aren't buried in the ground. They're buried in the people who raise us. And once they're exposed, nothing is ever the same. Before we close, share something. If this story reached you tonight, let us know what it stirred in you. And if you want to help more stories like this surface from the shadows, stay connected, keep watching, and keep these truths alive. Because it's only when we refuse to look away that hidden betrayals finally lose their power.